Chapter 21. Ash woke suddenly, sitting straight up and quickly taking in her surroundings. In only a second she collected her thoughts and recalled some vague details of the nightmare that had woken her, but it seemed an hour in her sleepy days, and she drew her hands to her face exhaustedly in a vain attempt to revive her strained senses. A flimsy tent shielded her from the crisp, snowy wind, and a fire crackled at its center, radiating heat and sending streams of smoke adrift through the hole cut in the roof. Piled around her sat many woven blankets and tapestries, courtesy of the pacifist villagers who maintained the refugee settlement at the summit of Mount Buromyces. She and her cortege had arrived some time ago, yesterday, she thought, assuming she hadn't slept too awfully long, and the villagers had offered them the same accommodations they offered all others who came their way, never asking why they had come or why they did not go elsewhere. The Grand Kiltias had been meditating in the temple and Prince Almid had not yet arrived, so they resigned to rest for the night, a necessity that all had been neglecting as of late. Yet she hadn't slept well, and now woke out of unpleasantness only to find more.
"Rise and shine, princess!"
She ran her hands through her hair, suppressing a groan and resisting the urge to glare at Balthier across the fire.
"Shut up,"
she said.
"Well,"
he scoffed in reply,
"you won't make much of an alliance with that attitude."
She groaned inwardly, but could not fight the relief that overcame her as reality took the place of her dreams. Dimness surrounded them, but through the smoke hole she could see light behind the thick clouds overhead, and knew that morning had likely come and gone, but the warmth of the fire soothed her, stirring in her a desire for still more sleep. Balthier's eyes seemed to intensify before the blaze, reflecting the flames in sparkling flecks of gold and auburn, while hers cooled in the contrast, a vibrant, turbulent blue against the livid orange that lit them. At once she lost her will to sleep, and spoke in a tone far harsher than she intended.
"Where is everyone?" "Bosch took the kids out for a while,"
he answered with a shrug.
"Out?"
she pressed. And he smiled.
"For the preservation of communal sanity, in exact words. He asked me to look after you."
She stared at him disbelievingly.
"Bosch entrusted my safety to you." "It's not my fault. Everyone seems to think I'm good at this sort of thing,"
he retorted.
"I'm perfectly fine on my own, thank you." "He said you'd say that."
"Oh, shut it."
"He said you'd say that, too. Half an Arcadian fleet is right above us, princess. For now, at least, you do need a babysitter." "Where's Fran?"
"Good question." She rolled her eyes, and he continued.
"What were you dreaming about?" "What?" "You looked upset." "Did I say anything?" "No, but I wasn't about to wake you, you probably would have dismembered me." "Why should you care about what I dream?" "I'm just curious. There's no need to get royal about it."
She sighed, turning her eyes to the floor uncomfortably, and at last spoke.
"What did you do?" "What?"
he asked.
"After she died." "That must have been some dream."
And now she sneered, her confidence quickly returning.
"Don't sound so flattered. Mostly I just dream about freedom and Dalmasca." "Freedom for Dalmasca or freedom from Dalmasca?" "You tell me." "If I could, I wouldn't have asked you."
She shifted with a smirk and began combing her fingers through her hair.
Then you're actually admitting that there's something you don't know.
He returned the expression.
You started it. So, what did you do? Well, I ran away. What else? I couldn't stand seeing him like that, so I ran, free at last. All that running and I got nowhere. You say that like it's all you've ever done.
Hey, he countered, you're the one who faked suicide.
Azelis came up with that,
she replied.
And it worked, didn't it? A little too well, I think. What's that got to do with your dream? I don't know. I don't remember all of it. What do you remember? The war was over. Lamont was with his brother. Things were better. Good. And it was terrifying. Bad.
She sighed.
How is it that sometimes you're so easily entertained and others you find everything boring?
He smiled.
How is it that sometimes you're so easily irritated and others you find everything interesting?
She groaned.
Really,
he went on,
you should see it coming by now. I should,
she agreed.
But I suppose I've never thanked you properly. This is far from safe work, and it's not as though it's been worth your while. I do mean to pay you eventually, though. It's just that the world is so difficult right now, and I have so many other things to consider, and... I didn't like you because you're Arcadian.
He smiled again.
I'm glad. What? Didn't? That's past tense, right? Don't let it go to your head. Too late. What did they call you? What? As a judge. Nothing I'd repeat in front of a lady.
She glanced off to the side and pressed her lips together to hide a smile, though Balthier seemed to see right through the attempt.
Maybe if you'd let yourself laugh more often, he suggested, you wouldn't be so pissed off all the time. Thank you, Vaughn,
she growled in reply, getting a small laugh out of him.
Forgive me for saying so, but I just have a hard time imagining you as a judge. I did, too. Do you know Bosch's brother?
Now he seemed to sober some, though he did not hesitate in his answer.
To an extent. What is he like?
She pressed, turning her eyes off to the side warily.
You don't want to know that. I asked, didn't I?
He stared at her for a moment, unsure if she truly meant it, but decided not to argue.
He's exactly like Bosch.
She replied with an expectant glare, taking this as a poor show of humor and an insult to her bodyguard, almost demanding an apology, but he did not waver in his opinion, simply shrugging and offering the best explanation he could.
It's true. Of course, I haven't seen him in 4 years. I suppose people can change. And if they change in one way, she replied, does that mean they can change back? Look,
Balthier all but groaned.
The man lost everything once, can't you forgive him for not wanting to lose it again?
She folded her arms and glowered at him through the waning flames.
I've had a bit of trouble forgiving any of the Imperials after what they did to Nabudis. Nabudis was an accident.
The answer came so suddenly that she had to pause to confirm that she had in fact heard it and not just imagined it. For a moment her eyes softened, giving way to the strangely misplaced hope that she so resented for its ability to weaken her, and she asked quietly, accusingly,
"What do you mean?" "One of the old bastard's experiments,"
he explained, letting his gaze drift to the smoldering coals before him.
"He in vain watched aboard the flagship of the Fourth Fleet, probably got quite a kick out of it. Experimenting with nethicite. Well, they certainly didn't know it was that powerful. They had Zect wipe out his own troops, too."
"Zect?" she asked. He shifted uncomfortably.
"The judge who led the attack. Sid told him what to look for and how to use it, for the good of posterity, of course. Sid knows how to use it. He's not going to tell you."
Her eyes seemed to sharpen, though she didn't miss a beat.
"What about you?" "You stand a better chance than I do,"
he growled.
"I mean, do you know how to use it?" "No."
A glare, and then,
"Honestly. No." "Then what about Zect?" "Zect is dead. And don't ask about Vayne."
Ash paused then, staring first at Balthier and then slowly down into the embers at the base of the fire, a sick realization hitting her no matter how she tried to beat it back.
"You see it now, don't you?"
Balthier asked.
"It comes out of nowhere, I know, but once you start thinking about it, you can't stop." "Well, that is to say you can, but there's only one way to do that."
She dazedly gripped the small chunk of nethicite in her pocket.
"Temptation,"
she whispered sadly. Seeing that even in the face of the truth she felt the power necessary, Balthier released a sigh and met her eyes.
"The choice is yours to make, but, please don't give your heart to a stone. You're too strong for that, princess."
A few faint crunches sounded outside, footsteps in the snow, and Monty drew open the tent's entryway, letting a hazy strip of pale blue light race up the opposite wall.
"Balthier,"
he began before noticing Ashalia and smiling.
"Oh, good. You're awake. Didn't I tell you I'd have her up in time?"
Balthier replied.
"I wasn't entirely confident in your methods,"
the boy quipped.
"Fran could use your help with the repairs."
Balthier rolled his eyes.
"I'm sure she could better use your help. I've got a war to stop." "Brat,"
he mumbled, rising to his feet. He failed to acknowledge the princess, but scruffed Monty's hair on his way out of the tent. Ash rolled to her knees and loosened her hair from behind her ears, and Lamont stepped closer, regarding her with a shy smile.
"Still cold?"
he asked.
"I'll be all right,"
she answered.
"I'm sorry we ambushed you."
She smiled a little and blushed.
"Don't be. You're really beautiful when you laugh."
She paused then, staring at him with mild shock, and he nervously turned his eyes away.
"Sorry. Just thought you should know."
And now she blinked a few times, willing herself to thank him, but unable to find the words.
"Anyway," he continued, "the Grand Kiltias is ready to see us now."
"Right," she said at last, shaking her head as though it would do her any good, and then rising to follow him outside. She, much like the others, had been exhausted upon their arrival and too bent on completing their mission to pay much heed to their surroundings, but Ash now found the small village quite peaceful and welcoming, and at last managed to allay her fears, if only temporarily. Many of the war's victims busied themselves in the settlement, as did many clergymen and a fair number of children. Crude structures stood at the edges of the area, marking its borders, but the majority of the dwellings within the camp proved little more than thin-skinned tents, their entrances flapping in the frigid breeze. Monty seemed quite accustomed to the snow, but she had not seen it since her earliest years, and never in such amounts as she saw now. Indeed, her only experience with snow, be it falling or already fallen, had been in the days that she spent in Nabratia, a guest in Rassler's household while their parents discussed matters too complicated, and boring, to concern children. But now her thoughts came to a brief standstill, slowly starting back up as she recalled that she had seen snow only 3 years past, and all of the 5 years preceding that. Why should she not consider the years in which she and Rassler were married when looking back on her past? The question puzzled her deeply, and the sudden distress on her face proved not well masked enough to avoid catching Monty's attention.
"Not a lot of snow in Dalmasca?"
he asked.
"No,"
she answered distantly.
"We got some each winter in Nabratia, but I never had much time to enjoy it." "That's too bad."
Sensing his uneasiness and fearing that her disposition might continue to worsen it, she raised her head a bit higher, attempting to look less vulnerable, and spoke awkwardly,
"Lamont, I was just wondering. Did you know Bolthier back when he was a judge?"
He smiled slightly, glad for the break.
"Of course. He was one of the good ones. He used to have drinking contests with Zecht and Gabranth all the time." "Why am I not surprised?"
Ash mused.
"Don't worry, he always lost." "Ah."
The realization of the question's original intent came to him after a moment's thought, and he quickly followed up.
"Oh. No, you can trust him. He didn't like the judiciary." "No, it's not that,"
she assured him.
I suppose I'm more concerned with his family." "What?"
Monty asked.
"His father? Most of the stuff people say about him isn't really true. Actually, I was kind of wondering about his mother." "Oh. She was nice." "Nice? Well, she really loved Sid." "Did he love her?" "Sometimes." "I see."
They passed the village limits and proceeded up a path cleared of snow that led to a modestly sized stone cathedral several yards away, and for a moment Ashalia felt the passing of the village activity to blame for the sudden silence. Upon glancing at Lamont, however, she found a mildly troubled look on his face, a subtle softening of his countenance, and spoke again, "You don't like to talk about it?" "It's all right," he said. "She just took really good care of me. I don't think she knew how not to love." She had no idea what to say, and deeply regretting even bringing it up, and therefore she simply changed the subject. "Sounds like Bosch." "No kidding," Monty replied. "Looking after you, putting up with Bolthier, helping the Rosarians." At this, she did a quick double take, finding that she had indeed heard him correctly. "What? Didn't Bolthier tell you?" he asked casually. "I guess not," she answered.
We went down to help Al-Mid and his cortege,
Monty explained.
They stole an Arcadian ship and crash-landed it about a mile downhill.
She shot him a look of stern curiosity, starting carefully up the icy steps to the church.
He didn't tell me anything about that. Really?
Monty replied, deftly taking her hand to stabilize her.
He volunteered to stay with you till we got back.
Ash resisted a childish huff.
He told me Bosch asked him to, something about the preservation of communal sanity. Oh, that part's true. But Bosch wanted to wake you up. Just be glad Bolthier didn't carry you. Good point. I just can't believe he trusted a pirate with me. It took some convincing. Bolthier's good at that. From me, I mean.
At this, she looked on him with bewildered eyes for a moment, but she soon found nothing worth complaining about and continued.
Oh.
He smiled.
Are you sure Al-Mid doesn't want to rest a bit before we begin?
She asked. Monty nodded.
I told him to take it easy, but it's no use. He's crashed a few ships in his day. He can handle it. I hope that's a good thing,
Ash replied quietly, getting a small smile out of Monty. They came to a stop at the heavy wooden doors, stomping their feet on the stonework before them to shake the snow from their boots.
Have you ever really dealt with Rosarians before?
He went on.
Not directly, she said. Is there anything I should know? Well, they're very friendly. Oh, really? The Emperor has 2 daughters about my age. Ah.
He cast a slow glance on her, more uncertain than shy.
And Al-Mid is the closest to your age who's not married yet, so.
She nodded.
Right. Thanks for the warning.